I mean, quite honestly, who lets other people touch their feet? I mean, think about it for a second. I want you to think of every person in your lifetime you have let touch your feet. All right? And think about what those contexts were. And then think about whether or not you would want them to touch your feet at a dinner party. In fact, I know what the answer is, because I know every year when we get ready to have our Maundy, Thursday service, people ask me, are you going to wash feet? And I say, not exactly these words, usually stronger, yes, we are. We're going to wash feet at the service because Jesus commands us on Maundy, Thursday to wash feet. And you know why I know you don't like it? It's because nobody really wants to do it. And as a pastor friend of mine once said, if you're going to go to a foot washing service, your feet are the cleanest they've ever been before you get to it. So, feet are not something we like to touch on other people. They're really not something we want anybody else to touch ourselves. I mean, if you think about the ways your feet have been touched, it's either in some kind of clinical situation or it's in some kind of very close relational situation. People that are even on good friends don't touch our feet, which is really strange because we touch every other part of people. In fact, we offer our hands all the time, these germ-ridden, flu-carrying instruments that God has put on the end of our bodies. We go and stick them on people. We'll put them on their faces. Any pregnant woman will tell you, if you've got a pregnant belly, it's become public property. Anybody that you don't even know them, they will come up and put their hands on your belly. We have sports teams where people touch each other's rear ends. We have all kinds of ways that we have no other body qualms. But when it comes to feet, people do not touch our feet. We might say our feet are ticklish, or we might say our feet smell. But I think there's something more about it. Because if somebody is touching your feet, there's a reason for it, and it creates a relationship that you may not want to have with them. Now, on Maundy, Thursday, the relationship Peter makes very clear, there's a relationship he does not want to have with Jesus when Jesus touches his feet. He does not want Jesus to be his servant. That is not the relationship that Peter wants to be in with Jesus. He should not be on the floor cleaning my dirty feet. And Peter objects because he does not want to enter that relationship with Jesus. And in another story, in which I think John is probably finessing here in his gospel, that the other gospel writers tell us that's so similar, it must be of a, either this happens to Jesus all the time, he lets his feet get washed at dinner parties, or John is just kind of working it for another angle. In another story where Jesus gets his feet washed, that's recorded in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there is somebody that objects that night, but he objects because he realizes the other aspect of feet washing, which is that there is something intimate going on. And this Pharisee who objects to Jesus having his feet washed, says, if you knew what kind of woman that was, she wouldn't touch your feet, because you would not establish the kind of relationship that allows foot touching with a woman like that. But Jesus very publicly lets his feet be washed by a woman. And it's very hard to understand what relationship is being put into place here. And maybe it's both. Maybe that Mary imagines that she is both serving Jesus and creating a relationship that is such closeness that she has the ability to touch his feet. But it's hard to say what's going on in the crowd around them, because, Judas objects, and if there are two events, Judas remembers the last one and says, well, I'm not going to object on relational standards this time. I'm going to find another reason to object to this very public and embarrassing situation Jesus has put himself in. And Judas does what a lot of religious people do, which is we have a lot of man-made marks of piety that we uphold as though they are religious marks of piety. And in this case, Judas upholds frugality, which, by the way, is not a mark of the mission of the church. Generosity is. But he holds up frugality. By the way, we all think that it's on the list of 7 virtues, but it's not. It's not. It's on this other list that we've made up with self-defense and being right all the time. These are things we think are are good things to do, but they're things we made up and then we gave to God, not the other way around. And he holds one of these up, and he does it in a very pious way because he says, shouldn't we be taking care of the poor? And Jesus says, yes, you should be taking care of the poor, but they're not here right now. I am. And here's the really kind of the mark or the change in this story. This relationship that Mary wants to have with Jesus, where it is service and where it is closeness. And this relationship Jesus is accepting from her of both those things, service and closeness. I believe that Jesus in his answer is saying, that is the relationship, the one that you see that Mary is establishing with me right now in this act of washing my feet, is the one that you should have with the poor. Because there's another missional mistake that we often make, and that missional mistake is this. We think that we are called to serve somebody who is in a far-off land much more than we're called to serve the person who is next door to us. In fact, Jesus is calling this out. I mean, often we say, we're going to save this money so that we can send it off, and Jesus says, well, those people aren't here right now. I am. The part of the call of mission to establish these relationships of service and closeness, the kind that would allow for feet touching of people in our neighborhoods nearby, is one that we should be working on with those that are nearby, and not ones that are far away. Because even though Judas calls on this false piety of frugality, the bigger mistake he makes is he thinks that we can substitute mission for someone who is not present with us for mission for someone who is present with us. This is a hard lesson to learn. I had a writer one time that I really enjoyed his writings, and he had moved to an Indian reservation, and somebody asked him if he had done that because he had wanted to have a mission to Native Americans that he couldn't have where he lived already. He said, no, I got a job teaching at a school on a reservation. It wasn't my choice. I needed to make money. And they said, well, why do you have a mission for me? He goes, because they're my neighbors. God didn't call me to love somebody any further off than the person who is next door to me. And so this picture that Jesus gives, and I think it's a very challenging picture, is not the picture of mission that we want to embrace. I mean, sure, it's easy for me to say we need to go next door. We need to find out who is our geographical neighbor. We need to learn to serve people who are present with us. That's one. But the next thing up is the image that Jesus gives us of serving them, which is this image of getting on the floor, either to establish the relationship that is between us as one of their servant or as one of their intimate, or as both. Because mission and ministry are things that require those two marks. They don't require piety, they don't require frugality, but they do require humility, and they do require intimacy. And so we've talked a lot about practicing this Lent, practicing temptation, practicing leaving the wilderness last week. This here is the picture of how we practice mission, and it is the one of Mary on the floor next to Jesus' feet, offering to be his servant generously, but also offering to be so close that he would accept her touch, and not just accept it, but defend it. And of course, the flip side of that is we too are required to be ministered to in ways that we must let other people touch our feet. Not just to wash them, but to anoint them and to love them. Because we learn to serve by serving and being served, and we learn to love by loving and being loved. And you can't do one without the other. You can't say you love other people if you hold on to a false piety like stoicism or frugality or self-defense. Those have to come down too. If you want to love other people, you must love. If you want to wash other people's feet, you must have your own washed as well. Amen.